Hello, this is Books, and I'd like to acknowledge the land we stand on is stolen land. When Silsil asked me to do this, she suggested I looked up the indigenous tribes that lived in the area I grew up. The indigenous cultures that exist in Central Texas before colonization are the Tanakwa and the Lipan. Googling all this information about indigenous cultures and what happened to them got me thinking about facts, narratives, and the way white people talk amongst themselves about these issues. I'd like to address the white people standing here as another white person. I know what facts about white supremacy sound like to you. I've been in the same skin, treated the same way, and been fed the same nonsense as you for my entire life. Our cultures over the last 100 years concerning the sins of white supremacy has taken a pretty interesting shift. For hundreds of years, we made white people's comforts so much a priority that it was even just considered in bad taste or rude to bring up anything related to white supremacy, much less to address it head on. This obsession around white people's comfort, while also finally living in a world where white supremacy is talked about in a meaningful way, has led to the doublethink we have in American history classrooms. Chapters front-loaded with the accomplishments of white men with no context given for their faults, and tiny paragraphs at the end of the chapter about whatever time period the chapter is on, how bad BIPOC, femmes, and indigenous cultures had it at the time. These narratives are intentionally designed to do one thing: to allow the white authors to pat themselves on the back for saying they presented the facts while not disrupting the white audience's comfort level. All of the facts surrounding the impact of white supremacy are presented in a way to do one thing for its audience: emotionally distance themselves from the content. The subtle emphasis on how long ago all this was and how much better things are now, leads to white people saying things like, well, I never owned slaves, so the legacy of slavery has nothing to do with me. Or, well, a lot of people conquered land throughout history, and those were my ancestors, so they are the colonizers, I'm not. This emotional distance is white privilege. You may know a lot of facts intellectually, you may be able to make a ton of convincing and sound arguments about exactly why white supremacy is evil. You may even be able to articulate the exact nature of how white supremacy is something you directly challenge in your everyday life through your actions. But BIPOC people are not afforded the luxury of solely intellectualizing these facts. These facts have an emotional impact that, as they are the milestones of a long history of generational trauma that is as unforgiving as it is painfully real for them. So during this land acknowledgement, as a white person, I am asking the white people here to listen to some phrases we've heard a million times, but intentionally address the white supremacy.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Address the white supremacy that keeps you from emotionally digesting the impact of the content. I am a colonizer, and the land I currently occupy is not my home. My ancestors stole this land from the indigenous cultures here through coercion and mass large-scale violence. My ancestors stole human beings of a different race and enslaved them for generations and are still reluctant to improve the conditions of the ancestors of the previously enslaved. Land back is not a talking point, it's not a call for revenge, and I barely even qualify it as a call for justice in my opinion. Land back is putting something in as simple of terms as you possibly can in an attempt to break through the noise white supremacy creates to keep a fog around the facts concerning its own sins, so white people don't have to feel the impact of those facts. Land back is simply saying, if you take something that isn't yours, you give it back. Next time you hear a BIPOC person talking about the facts of their generational trauma, always remember you have been trained since birth to not emotionally react to that information. And it is anti-racist work to remember that emotionally connecting with what the facts mean is going to help you unpack white supremacy far more than developing the airtight argument using the facts to convince other white people they are wrong, and you get to sit in the air of being a good white person who is right. Thanks.
Thank you, Books, for that. Books, it's not too often that, you know what, I don't really believe in the phrases of black and white.
Can you take a picture of the three of us?
I'm a person of color. People that we call white understand something. You're Caucasian. You are not the color of some of these signs out here, and I am not the color of my clothes. But it feels really, really good to have somebody that doesn't look like me really understand what I'm going through on an everyday basis. Please hear and understand what he said.